If you look behind me on the sofa, you'll note that someone is missing. In easily 95% of the videos I've made over the past 4 years, including almost all of the episodes of the Church of Splendor, a tiny little black cat named Ebony was on the sofa top for some or all of the video. She would come and go, but she lived her whole life around me, and so she was always in my orbit, always in my near orbit. She was my moon, my little black moon. And she expired this week. She died in my hands, splayed out on my chest. She'd been dying for a long time, and dying very obviously over the past 6 months. If you look at the past 6 months of the Church of Splendor videos, you will see Ebony wasting away. But as sad as her death was for me, it was, I think, the best experience of death I've had so far, because she died the way I wanted her to die. She died the way she wanted to be when she was dying, laying atop me with my hands around her. And she died so peacefully I didn't know she was dead right away. I had to discover it. But she got into my heart in the way that no cat has ever done before. I write long encomia to the dogs that I love when they die, but this is the first cat that I've ever written a tribute to, a eulogy for. You can find it on selfadoration.com if you want to read it. But it reinforces the awareness in my mind that life makes each one of us more cautious simply by transpiring. That the losses will accumulate over the years, and because we have comprehensive memory, we can't cause ourselves to forget those losses, those deaths. And so it tends to make us more cautious over time. I'm the least cautious person I think I've ever met. And I think that's a benefit. This is one of the great benefits of being driven, is that I'm so distractible. One of my favorite D words is distractible. And I'm so easily distracted by whatever it is that I'm concentrating on right now that I have no real concern for all of those things that are showing up in my rear view mirror. The only reason to ever look at the rear view mirror is to find out if you're driving too slow. If people are passing you, you're driving too slow. But otherwise, everything that's in the rear view mirror is behind you, and you can safely forget about it, because what matters is everything that's in the windshield, everything that's rushing toward you. The future matters, the past doesn't. Whereas for a cautious temperament, it's exactly the opposite. The past matters and the future matters a whole lot less. The only reason to think about the future is to avoid past pain. I don't think that way at all. The reason to think about the future is to pursue future opportunities. Past pain doesn't mean anything at all. All of this connects to the arguments about rancor that we've been taking up the past couple of weeks. We first talked about rancor management. Last week we talked about rancor avoidance. This week I want to talk about rancor elimination, the rancor-free marriage. How to be most happily espoused. It may not be possible to be perfectly happily espoused, because each one of you has his or her dispossibility, and that dispossibility will from time to time result in friction. But as we talked about with rancor management, recognizing how your conflicts proceed along the same identical track again and again and again, if you recognize those patterns, you can engineer around them, thus achieving rancor avoidance. And rancor elimination, or practical rancor elimination, is relatively easy. The first and most important thing you can do to avoid rancor in your marriage is to deliver on the promises that you made when you were courting, when you were betrothed, when you were wed. Deliver on those promises. Be the person that you promised to be when you first got together. And the second thing that you can do to eliminate rancor from your marriage is to acknowledge that your spouse is not you. Other people are not you. Other people do not live according to your expectations. Other people do not choose according to your disc profile. They live according to their own expectations, and they choose according to their own disc profile, and they are going to be who they are, regardless of who you want them to be. And so if you take account of the person that you married and recognize that he or she is the person that you courted, the person that you were engaged to, the person that you said I do to, rather than trying to torque and coerce that person into being who you would they would rather be now, apparently. Probably not true, but that's the way you behave anyway. You hold other people accountable for not being you, and you dismiss and deride the unique characteristics that attracted you to that person in the first place. This is a terrible idea. This is an amazingly poor idea because it cannot work, and all you will do is incur greater and greater dissatisfaction, greater and greater frustration, greater and greater conflict, greater and greater rancor. Your rancor will escalate over time simply because you are unwilling to accept that the person that you married is in fact the person that you married. If she's doing now what she was doing when you were courting her, then she's living up to the promises that she made when you were courting. If he's doing now what he was doing when you were engaged, then he's living up to the promises that you made when you stood in front of the priest or the judge and said, I do. And it's only by insisting that your spouse should not be who he or she actually is that you get to that state of incessant recurring conflict, constantly trying to redefine the terms of your marriage post hoc rather than living with the agreement that you made in the first place. And so this is all relatively simple, but even then, you have to remind yourself again and again, remind yourself of your own disc profile, of your own loves and hates, of your own dispossibility, and remind yourself of your spouse's unique characteristics in the same respect, especially your spouse's dispossibility. And so if you married a cautious temperament, then you cannot ever be dismayed that that person will become progressively more uncomfortable as the level of chaos in the surroundings increases. This is going to happen. If you married a driven personality, then you need to understand that that person will become progressively more frustrated when the productivity that he or she is seeking is not manifesting itself, is not evident, is not happening. When things aren't happening fast enough, driven people will drive you crazy. And accordingly, if you recognize that your spouse is driven, for instance, then the thing to do is to take the big issue off the table first. Whatever it is you know is going to drive your spouse crazy, deliver on that first. If you're married to a sociable person and, like me, I'm driven, practically speaking, conflict and rancor mean nothing at all to me. There's just more crap in the rearview mirror, and everything in the rearview mirror is meaningless. It's behind me. I don't care. My wife is very sociable. She cares very much. And so I get frustrated. I say something rancorous. I make some kind of testy remark. It doesn't mean anything to me. If anything, it's a way of pushing it out of my mind and putting it behind me. Whatever it is that's frustrating me, I just made it go away by this magical, mystical incantation of saying, God damn it, why isn't this done? And Kathleen, my wonderfully sociable wife, may stew about that for hours or days or weeks or forever. Fortunately, she doesn't do this because we both learn to manage each other's dispossibility, but this is definitely possible if you're married to a sociable person. If you're married to an incandescent person and you do things that humiliate that person, either within the context of your marriage or much worse out in public, you will have introduced a wound in your marriage that may be very difficult to heal, may be impossible to heal. And therefore you need to take account of who it is that you married and respond appropriately, respond accordingly. Kathleen told me a story a couple of years ago about a marriage that was about to fall apart. And one of the spouses said, before we do anything irreversible, let's just take a month and see what we can do. And that spouse stopped resisting, stopped fighting, stopped resenting, stopped rebelling against the other spouse's unique characteristics and instead just started delivering on the expectations that were implied all through the courtship engagement, all through the early part of the marriage, just started delivering, make your spouse happy. You know what will make your spouse happy. Do that stuff. Just do it. And this is not an issue of independence. You're not enslaving yourself to someone else's irrational expectations. No, you are delivering on the promises that you made and making the us of your marriage that much stronger by making your spouse that much happier. Deliver on your promises. Be the person you promised to be, and recognize, acknowledge, and celebrate when your spouse is being the person that he or she promised to be. Rancor, pain is nature's way of telling you that you're getting something wrong, and rancor is your marriage's way of telling you that one or the other or both of you is not delivering on your promises. And if you want to eliminate rancor from your marriage, all you have to do is deliver on your promises and recognize that your spouse is going to be who he or she is, regardless of any irrational expectations that you may have resulting from your irrational dispossibility. This all seems very simple to me. And pursuing the chart that we've been talking about the last 3 weeks and recognizing who it is that you're married to and how conflicts are going to emerge and how those conflicts are going to proceed, recognizing all of those facts, you can take all of that away simply by acknowledging who it is that you're married to and responding accordingly. And so this is my solution, and it's not simply a theoretical solution. It's what we've actually done in our marriage. We have a very happy marriage. Wasn't always the case, all but entirely my fault. But we have a very happy marriage now because we acknowledge and celebrate the unique and, in many respects, unchangeable people that we are. You can certainly change your habits over time, and I recommend it if you're cautious or incandescent or driven. I recommend pursuing sociability in your marriage particularly, that the best marriages are aligned on the driven sociable axis. The husband ideally is driven sociable in the marriage, and the wife ideally is sociable driven. That he's cultivating the usness of their marriage and she's nurturing the usness of their marriage, and those two acts together will make that usness ever stronger every day if you're both working toward those goals. And so whatever your natural disc profile is, you should be very conscious of gaining strength on that driven sociable axis within the context of your marriage and your family. And if you do that, things will get better over time. There are no quick cures, there are no magic bullets, there are no miracles, but your marriage will get better over time if both of you are working to gain strength on the driven sociable axis. Just about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, I officiated the wedding of Anthony and Marilee Johnson. So they're coming up on their second anniversary, and I had an email this week that indicated that they are about to have a very happy anniversary together, and I'm delighted by that. I'm very much delighted by that. I don't know that they're all that terribly happy with me, but no one is very happy with me for long except for Kathleen. But that weekend, the event of that marriage is one of the highlights of my life, one of the key events of my life, not simply because I officiated the marriage. I did what I see now is a good job, not a perfect job. If I were doing it today, I would do it differently, and I think I would do a more perfect job. But I did a very, very good job, and I covered a lot of ground that's very, very important to me, especially the idea of storgic love, the enduring love of families. But that weekend was wonderful for our marriage. Our marriage is wonderful all the time, but it was an amazingly great experience that Kathleen and I had that weekend, staying at the Renaissance Hotel in Las Vegas. No smoking, no gambling, my favorite kind of hotel in Las Vegas. But we had a very wonderfully romantic time together, and Kathleen was at her most beautiful. She's an amazingly beautiful woman anyway, but she was at her most beautiful. And the photograph of us taken by the wedding photographer is one of my favorite pictures in all of our marriage. And the thing that makes me happiest about it is the way that Kathleen is looking at me. The love she feels for me is palpable in that photo. Love, admiration, almost adulation, almost worship. I don't deserve it, but I do love it. I love that expression of her faith in me. And this is what you can have in your marriage if you're willing to accept existential reality for what it is. There is no alternative to the existential. There is no way that you can coerce or torque other people into being who you would rather they were rather than who they are. And accordingly, if you respond to your spouse in exactly the way that you did when you were courting, celebrating everything that he or she brings to you that you cannot provide for yourself, and delivering everything that he or she cannot provide alone, then your marriage will be wonderful. Not just no rancor, but enduring delight, true splendor. Very difficult to attain with anyone, and you can have it for life with the person that you love best in the world, just by responding to reality as it actually is. And what could be a better theme for the Church of Splendor? My name is Greg Swan. I'm so glad that I had this opportunity to talk with you. I'm sad that Ebony's not with us this weekend. She'll never be with us again, but she'll always be there in my memory and in my heart. Trying to keep from crying. This is the kind of relationship, the relationships that we have with our pets. So sad that they're so often better than the relationships that we have with people. But this is the kind of relationship that you can have with your spouse if you're willing to make the effort to acknowledge reality for what it is. Bless you. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you next week.